Hey, y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
We are the OG, the original Appalachian True Crime Podcast, Dylan.
And we say fuck a lot.
That pretty much sums it up. So if you're just joining us, now you know.
Now you know.
Dylan, I have a fascinating case. I've wanted to cover this case for a period, but there's a lot of information. This is going to end up being a two-parter.
Ooh, it's been a while since we did a two-parter.
Right. I always kind of go back and forth with, do we just have like an extra long episode, or do we make it a two-parter? I'm still not sure what our listeners like.
Well,
so feel free to give us some feedback.
Yeah, sometimes we can't shut up and it ends up being a extra long episode, and we don't mind that because we really enjoy talking to our listeners. But sometimes it's just so much information that has to be a two-parter.
This definitely is chock full of information, and I did not want to sacrifice the details. It's an older case, so we're getting in our Wayback Machine.
Ooh, let me fire it up.
Are you ready, Dylan?
Let go.
One of the most heinous crimes ever to occur in Georgia is actually not well known. Today's case will not only deliver you a cruel dose of evil, but also highlight some history. In the wake of modern discussions of critical race theory and acknowledging racial discrimination throughout our foundations, this case is important. Knowledge is power. Educating ourselves on the past, even the ugliest parts, can help us be aware and not let history repeat itself. Us Southerners are often told things changed after Appomattox, but it didn't. Slavery existed into the 20th century. It quietly persisted while Southerners allowed the world to think there was progress and equality.
Yeah, there's that period of reconciliation, and there was actually a lot of rights awarded early on after the war, but, they were quickly eroded by various other tactics of fear and intimidation. And
The Jim Crow South.
Well, Jim Crow South and just all kinds of stuff.
We're going to get into that, Dylan. Peon is considered a derogatory term, usually describing a person of low social class or someone who is regarded as menial or unskilled. But in 1921, when our story takes place, it meant something very different.
I've been called a peon before.
You have?
Yeah.
By someone important?
That's not good.
Who called you that? Who hurt you?
Well, they're not more important than I am. In my mind.
To understand our case, we first must examine the history for context. The Emancipation Proclamation, technically, along with the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, freed over 4 million slaves in the United States. However, slavery did not end in 1865, but merely took on other forms. One example of this system, Dylan, is called peonage. Have you ever heard of this before?
No.
Well, it's a system whereby black folks were held in servitude until they worked off their debts. Using peons carried on for nearly 5 decades in the southern states. After the Civil War, the U.S., particularly the South, adopted what was known as the Black Codes. They were like statutes that forced former slaves to have jobs. Unemployment was considered vagrancy or loitering, which was punishable by law, and you could be arrested, imprisoned.
Oh, so basically okay, you're free, but you have no money, nowhere to go, and if you do just leave walking under threat of the law, you can be put in jail because you don't have a place to stay or a job, basically?
Exactly.
Wow.
And these black codes also did not allow African Americans to freely travel. Because again, if you were seen traveling, you're a stranger, you're considered loitering, you can be arrested. Since black folks didn't have a lot of choice as far as employment went, they found themselves in dangerous, dire situations with low pay, much lower than white laborers. Local farmers would often pay off the fines of black folks after they were jailed. Once released, they'd be forced to work off the sum owed. The peons, as they were called, lived on the farmer's property, and worked long hours performing hard labor while receiving extremely low or no pay at all. Few ever earned enough to pay off the debts, which were sometimes only $5 or $10.
Wow. So this puts me in the mind of like a debtor's jail, or
That's totally what it is.
owing your soul to the company store. It's very, the more I think about it, this exists in our day and age, just in a different form. Be in debt to your eyeball, not having national health care coverage, therefore you stay at a job you hate with low pay just because you have insurance, blah, blah, blah. There's modern versions of this, and it's very scary.
Well, there are, I wouldn't say it's a modern version of that, maybe in some slight way, but our story today is going to show that no.
Well, no, I'm sure this is
we are much better off.
Yeah, I'm sure it's much scarier and uglier
than the peons of that time.
Okay.
So peonage meant a lifetime of hardship and brutal conditions. Often harsh punishments were doled out, such as severe beatings, whippings, and sometimes death, if workers didn't live up to their employer's expectations. If black folks ran away or tried to escape the farm, they were hunted down with dogs, much like during slavery, and ordered to the farm for punishment, which sometimes ended in death.
That sounds a lot like slavery.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're still being owned and controlled by this person.
Absolutely.
It's total bullshit.
Peonage was actually outlawed by Congress in 1867. Violators could receive a prison sentence and a fine up to $10,000. Many states prohibited the practice, however, it did little to actually curb the problem. Police and judges tended to turn a blind eye to the issue. White folks who might have been against the practice were often afraid to speak out, not wanting to earn a reputation as a, quote, black labor supporter or worse slurs.
Or just looking, wanting what's best for your fellow human. I mean, what the freaking hell, dude?
Well, if you were considered a sympathizer or a black labor supporter or a worse slur, as I mentioned.
N-word lover, let's just go ahead and say it.
You could be targeted as well as your family. I mean,
Right.
It was dangerous to speak out, to speak up and speak out. So, in some areas, law enforcement worked out special deals in which they would arrest black people on these trumped up charges in order to have a steady supply of manpower for local farmers. In turn, they might get paid or get some kind of kickback. Then they worked to actively help the farmers keep the workers in place on the farm.
Wow, now you're describing our modern prison system.
Dylan, this story is
I mean, it just blows.
something else.
I mean, yeah, and I'm sure it's only going to get worse, but I'm already mad. So, yeah, let's just keep going.
Trust me, by the end of part 1, you will be ready for part 2, and you're going to be fuming mad. Okay? Yeah.
Because, this evokes, like, workers' rights, human rights, just like, I just don't get it. I don't get how you can think it's okay to treat other human beings like this for profit.
Well, and the worst part of it, Dylan, as a society, as a nation, we want to sweep this under the rug and we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to educate future generations about these types of things. We consider it ugly, a stain, hurtful, or we just flat out deny that it even happened.
Well, and I think that's a very important point. You can't just scrub your history and make it fuzzy and warm and make you feel good in the modern day. You have to look at all the good, the bad, and the very ugly in your history. You need to know about those things because this stuff still reverberates through our society. I mean, there's no way to ignore that.
Jonas Williams was a man most would have referred to as a gentleman farmer. I've heard that term thrown around before. How about you?
Oh, I bet you have. Hey.
Yeah.
Why don't you come check my crops out? That's how I'd open up if I was a gentleman farmer.
It's like working on a sex farm by Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
Was it something crouching in your pea patch? And like, I'm going to take out
Ooh.
my pitchfork and poke it in your hay.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll have to listen to that song later. I'm a huge Spinal Tap fan, by the way. So, this gentleman farmer, Williams, he owned a successful, prosperous plantation about 40 miles from Atlanta, Georgia. The farm spanned around 2,000 acres with a large, kind of white, antebellum style, like farmhouse. Not like the plantation style house we would see in like Gone with the Wind, but one of those like big old farmhouses.
Okay.
You know, just really nice house. It had modern conveniences, and Mrs. Williams had a beautiful rose garden which featured shrubbery and vines. People would always rave about her beautiful rose garden. It was like a sight to see. To showcase his wealth, Williams owned 3 cars housed in 3 garages. Now, in 1921, that was definitely a show of prosperity.
Yeah, I would say so. Most people don't have 1 car, let alone 3. And then I would say a garage to park your car in is probably even more of a luxury.
He was well dressed, often taking his Chandler touring car to town. By age 54, Williams had fathered 12 children.
My God.
Poor Mrs. Williams.
Jeez Louise.
They didn't tell her it was not going to be a rose garden, right?
She needs the rose garden just to go sit and soak in.
Poor woman.
Damn.
Born in 1866, Williams grew up in the Reconstruction era. These were hard times. Most rural Georgians, I'm not sure how to say that.
I think it's Georgians.
Georgians were leading difficult lives after the Civil War, and for most black folks, hardships were unimaginable. Southern states were given free rein to rebuild themselves. Radical Republicans eventually took a firm hold on the Reconstruction in the South, passing the Reconstruction Act of 1867. This temporarily divided the South into 5 military districts and outlined how the governments were to be organized. Part of this Reconstruction was the participation of African Americans in Southern public life. It was essentially a large-scale experiment in interracial democracy. Though the 15th Amendment granted black folks the right to vote, it was mostly denied at the polls.
Yeah, through fear and intimidation.
Discouraged.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or outright refusal to allow you to pass.
Or those poll taxes.
Yeah, or just thugs out front with sticks.
For the first time, the South was forced to fund state-run public schools, saw progress in allowing black people to use public transportation, and saw ambitious economic development projects like building railroads. However, Southern whites turned to violence in response, forming groups like the KKK and other white supremacist organizations. Around 1874, an economic recession plunged the South into extreme poverty. So John Williams, from an early age, grew up with animosity toward African Americans. Like many white Southerners of the time, Williams was raised to believe that black folks were always the first suspect in any crime, and no matter how decent one might be, they were not to be trusted. He considered black folks useful but troublesome.
Okay.
By 1921, as I mentioned, Williams owned the 2,000-acre farm in Jasper County, Georgia, which, by the way, I learned through my research that you remember the TV show In the Heat of the Night?
Yeah.
That courthouse is like, I believe, the Jasper County courthouse.
Okay.
It's like in the opening scenes or whatever, which I think was supposed to be like Sparta.
Oh,
It
okay.
was like the town they lived in or whatever in the heat of the night. I saw that movie, Mr. Tibbs, but I didn't really watch the TV show. That might have been a little bit before my time.
Sidney Poitier.
Exactly. So, with 3 of his adult sons, Hewland, Leroy, and Marvin, those are some names, right? Williams ran the farm with the use of peons. The Williams farm's main crop was cotton, but they also raised corn, wheat, oats, and had livestock. At any given time, Williams had 30 laborers working the plantation. No romanticism here, Dylan. Williams ran his farm like a brutal dictator.
Sounds like a really great guy to work for.
Yeah.
If you can call that work.
One worker made a total of 35 cents for a whole year of work. There is no record of any laborers ever working his or her debt off to Williams. At night, the hands were crowded into a bunker-style building, which were locked with chains and the windows nailed shut. The shutters were boarded up from the outside. But the worst part was the extreme abuse doled out by the Williams family. For offenses such as picking less cotton than other field hands or being unable to perform difficult physical tasks, hands were beaten nearly to death, then expected to turn around and go back to work with broken bones or serious injuries.
That defies logic. How could you beat someone within an inch of their life and then expect them to go out and do manual labor for who knows, 8 or 10 or 12 hours the next day?
Some of the offenses that you could be beaten for would be simply being caught like sitting down, like taking a break.
So no setting and looking.
No setting and looking for you, Dylan.
I would never make it.
It was known that on Sundays, the Williams would run their tracking hound dogs. They would choose a random black man from the labor pool, forcing him to run through the woods while the dogs chased him down. Once the hounds caught up, they had their way with the man, often biting and seriously hurting him. The Williams used this tactic to prevent anyone from trying to escape the farm. We'll get more on that later in the story.
So basically, that's a display of, if you run away, we're going to get our dogs who are trained and ready to go and run you down.
Yes.
And allow them to bite you if we don't just outright kill you.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, this is like...
Now, could you imagine being one of these, let's just call them post-war slave? I mean, really, that's what they are. They're living in fear, and they're not prospering at all. It sounds like their basic needs are barely being met. You know, food and clean space to live, and just the torment and the emotional fear I just don't. Psychological warfare.
It's just a fucked up situation.
It is, and I just, the people who could do this to anyone they're monsters. They lack empathy. They're just not human.
But wait, Dylan, there's more.
God.
And that brings us to the worst part of the Williams story. The barbaric murders of 11 black men.
My God.
The Williams way of life was not a secret. Rumors and stories spread all over Jasper and Newton counties about John and his sons, but nothing was done. Maybe some of it was apathy or plain old intimidation. John Williams was a powerful man with money. He also was not the only one using the peons to run his business. Again, no one wanted to be seen on the side of black folks, and the occasional death of a peon was not considered a big deal. It was more of a minor inconvenience that came with the territory. A new peon could always be purchased at a cheap price. At the time of our story, no white Southerner had been charged or convicted of murdering any black persons for 40 years.
Okay.
Now, do you believe that is accurate?
No, not even.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's not even close.
Right. When I read that, I was like, and people bought this
So,
line? That this is... No.
When your story's transpiring that you're telling us right now, no one had been convicted of murdering a black person for 40 years.
Yes.
Up to that point.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just a fucking lie. Let's be honest.
Absolutely.
Well, what you get is everyone in the area, or no, I shouldn't say everyone, but the people who with the power are profiting off of this continuation of slavery, and you get like if black folks had every right guaranteed to them after the war, and everything that was outlined, it would have been great. It would have been like, wow, our first chance to prosper. We're official citizens now. We can vote, all that. But it was systematically taken away on a community by community basis, and it was almost like no one, even at the federal level, they didn't really try to enforce it, right? They didn't try to back up the laws.
Will you stop jumping ahead on my story?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, this is all in my head. I'm smart.
Clyde Manning had lived on Williams' farm since the age of 13 or 14. Manning's father had been mysteriously gunned down with some other farm workers.
It wasn't a white person, though.
At the time, John Williams reached out to Mrs. Manning, who had other children, offering his protection and steady work. There was also a law in the books at the time, I believe it was enacted in like 1867, that said black children could become a ward of white guardians if there was the death of a parent or like if a family couldn't take care of the children financially. So in a lot of these cases, Dylan, a family, like a black family, dad would mysteriously be killed, right? End up dead or imprisoned on some charge and given like a life in prison. And they could come in, whoever, the government, whatever in the county, take the children, put them in the care of a white person, and this child would become the warden of the white family, and they could be used for labor and other services until the age of 21. However, few black children ever escaped the white families, and this became another form of slavery.
So even when they made it to 21, they just kept on.
Yeah.
You're stuck here. We're not going to let you go.
Pretty much, yeah. Some describe John S. Williams as Clyde Manning's surrogate father. Williams tutored Manning, and in exchange, Manning was absolutely loyal to his employer. Now, when I say surrogate father, I don't mean that Williams was kind, warm, affectionate. I guess he kind of mentored the young man, but it was mostly Clyde Manning's fear that made him obedient. If that makes sense.
Basically, he just has control of him, and he's afraid to do anything against what he says.
Clyde Manning was illiterate and never left the vicinity of the farm. He was considered a good-looking young man who worked diligently and won Williams' trust to an extent. Manning was entrusted with driving Williams' cars around and given a lot of responsibility. He was like a foreman of sorts on the farm, responsible for all the laborers, which, there's 30 laborers typically on the farm, so he does have quite a bit of responsibility. In 1913, Manning married a woman named Rena, and they started to have children together. Manning was given a section, kind of like an apartment or a living quarters, in the laborers' bunkhouse. So it was kind of divided up, like Rena, Clyde, and their children lived like in this little apartment kind of setting, right? And then there was like a door, and that's where the other side was like the bunkhouses, like the bunks were lined up.
Okay.
And people were kind of crammed in there.
Probably like a shitty dorm.
Yeah. Or like a
shitty barracks.
Yeah, like a really shitty barracks. His wife, Rena, was responsible for feeding the laborers 3 meals a day. At night, Manning was in charge of mustering the laborers and locking the chains at bedtime, and in the morning, unlocking the door. So, and this sounds like prison. It's like...
What is?
You have to muster. We got to check everybody's name off.
A head count.
Then you have bedtime. He locks you in.
Yeah, we're going to put you away in your cell.
Yeah, pretty much.
And can I point out the obvious safety issues with locking someone in?
If there had been a fire or something?
Anything.
You've got the windows nailed, shutters boarded up.
Everyone would be dead.
Yeah. Now, like I said, at night, he would lock the chains, and in the morning, unlock those. Later, Manning won't be able to recall life before the Williams plantation. When he's asked about it, he only knows that he had been born in Jasper County. So this man had, really never known anything other than this life. Because it'll come into question later. Is Manning a responsible party, or is Manning like a victim in all of this?
Right.
And really, he's both. But we'll get into that. Manning thrived with the added responsibility and trust, while Williams seemed to relish in Manning's obedience. Manning was also smart enough to understand that any protest of his master's orders, basically, was a direct endangerment to his mother, siblings, wife, and children, who also resided on the farm. Manning also had never considered leaving the farm because he knew nothing else. He had no knowledge of the world outside of Jasper County, which he referred to as the United States. not even Georgia or like by county name. So if he was talking about Atlanta or Newton County, which was the neighboring county, he would call it the United States, out in the United States.
So he knew the farm, and then he knew of the United States.
And that's it.
Wow.
Williams also paid Manning about $20 a month, which was way more than anyone else earned on the farm. John Williams seemed to begin his peonage operation while his 4 eldest sons were fighting in World War I. Williams was very proud of his son's participation in the war. Upon returning, his son Gus, a doctor, practiced medicine in Mackinac, Georgia, while his other 3 sons came back and worked the farm. While Clyde Manning was his overseer, John Williams granted another man named Clyde Freeman to help his sons Marvin, Hewland, and Leroy on another farm they owned about 5 miles away. The house on Hewland's property had a long hallway. Hewland stayed on one side of the house while his African-American workers stayed on the other side. The doors to their quarters were described as having a cleat across with a hole and a big wire that ran through it with a bolt and a hook on the outside.
Okay.
Up to 18 men would sleep in this small space at any given time.
You're working hard and you can't even lay down flat, have a space to yourself. It just sounds so terrible.
Iron John was the name given to a laborer who worked on Williams' farm. He was poor, illiterate, and had run afoul of the law in some minor way. He was locked up in the Atlanta stockade because he didn't have the $5 to pay the fine. It was in early 1920. Williams arrived at the stockade looking for workers. He approached Iron John, explaining that he could pay off the fine if the man agreed to work on his farm. Work off the debt. He promised weekly pay, good meals, clothing, and housing. Williams explained as soon as the money was worked off, Iron John would be free to leave. Not long after joining Williams' workforce in spring of 1920, Iron John was tasked, along with Clyde Manning and a couple others, to build a hog and goat pen. His job specifically was to roll the wire up a hill.
Oh, wow.
On this particular day, Leroy, one of William's sons, was supervising the project. He noticed Iron John rolling the wire up the hill, and it was not to his satisfaction. As Leroy saw it, Iron John was not rolling the wire straight.
Who cares as long as he gets it up there? He's the one dragging it all over the place.
He calls over Clyde Manning. Leroy orders Manning to take care of it. So Manning went over to Iron John, carefully showing him how Leroy wanted it done. Iron John, following instructions, proceeded to roll the wire uphill. Leroy was still not happy. He saw Iron John's behavior as disobedience. That's when an angry Leroy, who was known to have a very short fuse, ordered Iron John to the work shelter. This meant one thing to everyone on the farm. The work shelter was where beatings were administered.
Why does this sound like my management at work?
Oh, come on, that's not funny.
They're assholes.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing, Dylan. Don't be that guy. A fearful Iron John did what he was told and went to the work shelter. Once inside, he was told to strip to the waist and then lie across a large gasoline barrel. Leroy then ordered some of the other men to hold him down. Leroy then forced one of the other laborers to take a buggy whip. The laborer, scared himself, executed a mean lashing. Leroy ordered the man to keep going, like keep whipping him, you're not done, put your back into it, go harder, that kind of thing. At first, Iron John cried and begged for mercy. The more emotion he showed, the more Leroy insisted the whippings continue. Finally, a defeated Iron John stopped whimpering and said, quote, "Don't whip me no more. I'd rather be dead than treated this way." That's when Leroy approached the injured man. He pulled a pistol, which he always carried on his hip, and held it to Iron John's shoulder. Leroy then fired the gun.
My God.
Afterwards, he asked Iron John, "Do you want some more?" And Iron John replied, "Yes, shoot me." And that's when Leroy took the pistol to Iron John's head. With another shot, Iron John lay dead simply because a white man didn't like the way he rolled a wire up a hill.
Well, that's just stupid. And now you've lost a worker and you've killed him over nothing. And I mean, it's just all around stupid and isn't good for anybody.
Also, because the fella just didn't have a couple of bucks to pay a fake fine.
Yeah, I was going to say when you were talking about the price of the fines, what they've done during this period is actually made slaves cheaper to purchase, because back in the before this time the slave was way more expensive.
Leroy then ordered Manning and others to dump the body in a pond on the property. Another female house servant named Emma Freeman described being pistol whipped on multiple occasions by Mr. Williams and his sons. She was pistol whipped once for serving dinner late, another time because she made a meal that one of the Williams sons didn't like, and at other times just to suit Mr. Williams.
Okay.
In one instance, Mr. Johnny, that's what he was called by the workers. Instead of John or Williams, they called him Mr. Johnny, beat a whole crew of men for not picking enough cotton. Manning wasn't usually whipped or beaten, but one time he was hit so hard by Mr. Johnny that his arm was broken. One worker was thrown from a mule and nearly killed. He sustained a broken leg. Mr. Johnny almost shot the man because of the injury.
Okay, it's like it's a horse that breaks its leg or something. I got to put it down now because I don't want to mess with it.
That's the attitude he had, definitely. Workers were pitted against one another to improve productivity. One of Mr. Johnny's policies was to whip the man who picked the least amount of cotton for the day. Often, the stronger workers would steal cotton from a weaker man's bag to avoid being whipped. I mean, so this is just a really fucked up situation.
Well, yeah, you're making them even prey on each other, just out of a fear of what could happen,
Yeah, like
self-preservation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just having to live like that.
This story breaks my heart.
Creating an atmosphere like this, when they're probably they're growing crops, they're making money. So I mean, I would guess that maybe they could just pay laborers a fair a wage. Even I say fair wage, but even just there's probably people willing to do this work for a certain amount of money an hour or a wage per day. But they don't even want to do that. They want to get these people for next to nothing, exploit them, and treat them like animals. Because it's just it's a continuation of the previous mindset. That's all it is.
During this time, another worker named Nathaniel Wade, his nickname was Blackstrap, decided to escape. He managed to outrun the dogs and the grasp of Jasper County law enforcement. Wade found himself in South Georgia about a week later, where he took up work on another farm. But Jonas Williams' clout spread far and wide. When the South Georgia farmer received word that the Williams plantation had a runaway peon, he immediately reported Wade's whereabouts.
Damn it.
Williams apprehended Nathaniel Wade, returning him to the farm, where he was to receive a brutal punishment. The pummeling was so severe that Wade begged to die. A worker named Charlie Chisholm was handed a pistol by Williams and then told to shoot Wade. Clyde Manning, and Chisholm were then told to dispose of Wade's body.
Damn.
So why do you even go through the bother of driving down to pick up this man just to bring him home and kill him?
Because they're sadistic. They enjoy that part of it.
It's so fucked up. Federal agents often received complaints about peonage, especially in Jasper County. Williams Farm had multiple complaints. However, the agents were slow to investigate. Peonage was, after all, the South's dirty little secret, and these federal agents were not like the Hoover G-men portrayed in movies. These agents were usually local good old boys who understood this was just, quote, how things were.
Yeah, it just came with the territory.
During 1920, Hewlin Williams showed up at the Atlanta stockade to secure some new workers. A man named Gus Chapman had been locked up for loitering, but was unable to pay the $5 fine. Initially, Gus Chapman was reticent to lock in a deal with Hewlin Williams. He was skeptical of Williams' offer. The weekly pay and eventual release from the farm, it just sounded like fishy and too good to be true.
Well, yeah, you got this stranger you don't know from Adam offering to pay get you out of jail and saying they'll give you a place to live, a job, clothes, three meals. And yeah, and he probably doesn't trust him. And can you blame him?
Yet working on the man's farm was more enticing than being at the stockade. Atlanta's stockade was built in 1896. At the time, it was considered the largest penal complex in the state of Georgia. It consisted of a blacksmith shop, stables, and a two-story concrete neoclassical and goth architecture building. During the 1800s, the only sentence worse than death was being given a life sentence at the stockades. Although city officials would later claim only one person had died there, workers building I 20 would discover the remains of 50 unknown persons buried on the prison grounds.
Damn.
Some called it, quote, the city prison farm. The prison was severely overcrowded. Some described it worse than slave conditions, with a lack of any kind of health care, proper nutrition, and forced labor like they would be sent to work at the municipal dairy farm.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Chapman agreed to the conditions of his release. Life on the Williams farm was worse than he imagined. Chapman immediately found himself in a terrible situation. The work was difficult, the whippings were doled out almost daily, and he immediately regretted his verbal contract. By July of 1920, only a few months after arriving, Chapman approached Manning one evening as Manning was locking the door chains on the bunkhouse. Gus Chapman pleaded with him, "Let me go."
So, I mean, that speaks volumes there. He would rather be in prison or jail and being with forced labor, poor conditions, than being on this farm. The farm's even worse.
Yeah, just about. Manning warned Chapman, "If you leave, I'll be in trouble." But Chapman was relentless. Finally, Clyde Manning unlocked the chains, allowing Chapman to run. In order to escape punishment himself, the following morning, when Williams discovered this missing man, Manning informed him that a scuffle.
I got into a scuttle.
I can't a scuttle hole. I can't even read my own typing here. I'm sorry. It's late. That a scuffle had occurred. Manning described a scene in which he found Chapman attempting to rape his wife, Rena.
Okay.
So this garnered a bit of understanding from Mr. Johnny, who did not whip or punish Clyde Manning. Instead, Mr. Johnny ordered his sons to release the hounds.
And run him down.
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, you imagine you're on the run, which is on foot, no help, no vehicle, no money, likely. Probably not even shoes. Who knows? And you're trying to go through the woods or the fields or
Wasn't
whatever.
there the scene in Django where someone's on the run and they like release these dogs and they like attack the guy?
Maybe.
I believe there's like a
Maybe
scene
so.
because I remember it like made me want to cry.
And then you hear in the distance the hounds baying and getting closer and closer. Oh my God, the psychological terror and I don't know. I can't even imagine how you would feel in a situation like that. But it seems horrible. I mean, really, truly.
No, absolutely. I mean, I would be so afraid in a situation like this.
Yeah.
Gus Chapman had no idea where he was. He decided to hide out. Chapman trusted no one and traveled only at night. He had hoped to make it to Monticello, then follow the train tracks to Macon, Georgia, where I believe he was originally from Macon and had some family there. So he was kind of like, if I can just get to Macon, I'll be okay. In months, Gus had only earned 25 cents, which he had on his person at the time of his escape.
A whole quarter.
A whole quarter. Proving unsuccessful in his escape attempt, Williams and the dogs tracked Chapman down to Shadydale, which was not very far from the farm, like only a few miles away. Hungry, exhausted, and feeling defeated, Gus surrendered. He was transported back to the plantation, where he was beaten within an inch of his life. After the extremely violent abuse, Chapman was then ordered to cut firewood for the rest of the day.
Okay.
Bleeding, like broken down, bruised. and then you have to go cut firewood.
Seems like the last thing you would want to do after you've been beaten.
It's just so
Because
cruel.
cutting firewood's fairly
It's
physical.
a very strenuous
Yes.
task, yeah. And you've got the repetitive motion, and it's hard to do. To split firewood is not easy. While weeks turned into months, Gus Chapman had formulated other plans. He would not toil away the remainder of his days on Williams' plantation. Gus Chapman knew if he ran again, getting caught was a death sentence, yet he would not give up hope. A week after Thanksgiving, Chapman once again asked Clyde Manning to free him. Between midnight and 1 a.m., Manning unlocked the chain door for Chapman. He had 10 cents, the wages he'd earned since his first escape in July.
Okay.
So from July to November, here's a dime.
Why don't you just not give him anything? Because, honestly, this minuscule amount is almost even more of an insult than zero.
The thing is, Dylan, Chapman had been studying. This time, he knew which direction was north. He knew if he headed north, he could reach Atlanta, where surely he could get some help. This time around, Gus Chapman was able to slip away into the darkness. Neither Williams nor his hounds were able to track the man. When he reached Atlanta, he found a community of sympathetic African Americans who did indeed help him out. Those who heard his story directed him to the Bureau of Investigation offices in Atlanta. It was not yet called the FBI at that point. It was still just the Bureau of Investigation. Peonage was not high on the Bureau's priority list, but there were 2 agents assigned to investigate reports of peonage in the South. These particular men, Agent Brown and Agent Wismer, were considered point men on all things related to peonage. Mostly, their findings resulted in heavy fines for farmers and those who violated. Farmers were not the only ones who exploited peons. The railroad and producers of turpentine also employed peons. In 1907, nearly 1/3 of all farmers in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi used forced labor. Between 1903 and 1905, peonage was reported in every county in Alabama.
Now, is it outright illegal, this system, or is it only illegal if you don't stick to the bargain of letting, them eventually pay off their debt and letting them go and not trying to beat them to death every time they turn around?
No, I think it's completely
Just the whole thing's bullshit.
It's completely illegal to do, but
okay.
Yet no one's really enforcing these laws.
Right.
Right. It was widespread. Obviously you can see there's 1/3 of all farmers. It's reported in every county in Alabama.
Well, to the point where no matter where someone goes and tries to get, some work, any farmer knows, can hear the rumors or that someone, just like they reached out and returned him to the previous owner. So, yeah.
Like I said, it was widespread, plus the collusion between violators and local law enforcement often hindered investigations. Most of the victims of peonage lived in isolation, fear, and everyday horror. Most were not even aware of their rights. Most of these poor black folks didn't even know that, this was illegal.
So, in reality, they should be able to even go to local authorities, which probably wouldn't work because they're friendly with the farmers and the other people of power in the area. But they should be able to find help, but they don't even try to seek out help from anyone.
No, because they're not even aware of their rights.
Right.
They don't know to ask for, hey, I need a contract, or
hey,
I need you to show me a record of the money I'm working to pay off. None of that. They don't know their basic rights, right? Because most of them, again, mostly illiterate, very poor, and they don't know. We're going to pause, Dylan, and take a quick break, and we will be right back. And we are back, Dylan.
Oh, yeah.
Giggity, giggity.
Giggity.
The agents did take down a report from Gus Chapman. They had other reports on the Williams farm, including information from an escapee named John Strickland, who had managed to get away earlier. During the whole interview, Chapman pleaded with the men not to return him to Jasper County. If I tell you what happened, you promise you won't send me back there.
So the only good thing here is they've made it up above the local sheriff or town magistrate or whatever. So that's good. They've made it to the Bureau of Investigations, the
These federal
federal,
agents.
yeah, who aren't directly connected to people in the area. So maybe, just maybe, they can get some help.
It's just so sad that this man is so terrified that he doesn't even want to get help because he's afraid they're going to send him back. Like, again, he doesn't even know his rights. And the agents had to explain to him that they weren't going to return him because the agreement had been illegal. So John S. Williams didn't, quote, own Chapman. They had to, explain this to him. Side note, we're going to get into a little more on this, and then we'll return back to our story. So Chapman and Strickland were not the first escapees from the Williams farm. A 16-year-old named Frank Dozier had been arrested for vagrancy because he was sitting down at the Macon train depot.
What are you doing there?
Sitting and looking, he gets arrested.
Why ain't you standing, you dumb bitch? Man, this is such... just everyone involved in this is such assholes. None of it makes sense. You know what I mean? It's one thing if someone's causing trouble or committing crimes, then yeah, you need to. But it's just I don't know.
Because someone's taking a seat at a train depot where there are benches and plenty of other people having a seat.
I was gonna I'm gonna guess he's not the only person having a sit.
Yeah, but because he's a black man having a sit, it's illegal. It's loitering, right? So this guy, it's the same song and dance. He doesn't have the money to pay this fine, a couple bucks. He's sent to the stockade. And, of course, Williams comes to get this 16-year-old kid. Now, he's a minor. He's not even an adult. And they throw him in prison.
That doesn't matter.
It's just terrible.
It does matter, but they're not going to care about that.
So he gets this kid, takes him back to the farm. The boy immediately was like, fuck this shit, and runs. He successfully made it to Covington, Georgia. He was spotted by Williams when he was there and chased with a bloodhound through the woods. Dozier ended up fleeing up this creek where he laid in the water under a bridge all night.
Wow.
He wasn't discovered again by Williams. So laying in this freezing creek water throughout the night under a bridge was the only way he escaped these hounds.
You have to get in the water and go up or down, but just stay in the water for quite a ways, and then you can get out of the water and continue about your way.
Also, the murders that I've covered so far are not the first reported on the farm. As early as 1911, there were talks of men being killed. One man was called Long John. His real name was John Singleton. Went to a pasture in 1919 and never came back. It was said that Marvin Williams shot him. Clyde Freeman, another worker, said about a week later he was pulling corn when they noticed some buzzards flying overhead. He found Singleton floating at the top of the pond on the farm. Williams got a rope and wire and pulled the body out, tied some rocks to it, and sunk the remains back into the pond.
Okay.
There were reports of several men being disposed of in this particular pond. Because again, Iron John thrown in the pond. During the hog killing season between 1920 and 1921, a worker named Will Napier was shot by Hewland Williams. 3 doctors, including Williams' own son, Dr. Gus Williams, treated the man's injury, but he died that night from this wound to his abdomen. The doctors didn't ask what happened or how the shooting had occurred. It was also not reported to authorities. They considered that what a white man did to his black laborers was his own business.
Okay.
And it's strange that John Williams would even get these doctors to come and try to save this man. I mean, he's just so cold and callous.
If anything, he wanted to save him so he could put him back to work, or maybe just keep him alive to torture him some more, because, he's just a full-blown sadist.
The agents had some other business in the area. So on February 18th, 1921, 2.5, 3 months after they get this report from Gus Chapman, the 2 agents pay a visit to Williams' farm. Mr. Johnny and his sons were not present. He had left Clyde Manning in charge on this particular day. Agents Wismer and Brown interviewed the farmhands, noting they were seemingly well fed and properly dressed. That was another thing with peonage, Dylan. If law enforcement saw that the workers looked well fed and that they did have on like proper clothes and shoes, they tended to be more like relaxed with like, well, they're being taken care of. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
Right? But if they showed up and if these people were like scraggly and, obviously not wearing any clothes or wearing like rags and not properly dressed and have shoes on, that kind of thing, it was more of like, well, we're going to find the farmer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's like a fine. You fine him, but you're not arresting him and saving everyone.
Well, again, they don't give a fuck.
You fine him. It's like in the modern day, OSHA comes into your workplace and some horrible safety violation, and they fine them $4,000. A multi-million-dollar company. What is that going to do to deter the farmer or the company from that same behavior?
However, most of the black workers on the farm said nothing to these agents. The federal agents noted the workers were clearly afraid to speak, especially in front of Clyde Manning, who was described as the boss man while Williams was away. Manning was willing to answer the questions, but cautiously. Agents saw that Manning was wearing a pistol, which was highly unusual and made them feel uncomfortable. Because here's this black guy with a gun. So they were like, and here Williams is giving him this responsibility and here giving him a gun. They were just like, this makes us feel some type of way.
Okay.
Manning denied reports of abuse and said Mr. Johnny was a good boss who paid him $20 a month. Of course, he's making $20 a month, but like no one else is.
Well, yeah, he's doing okay, but everyone else is suffering.
One of the agents inquired about Gus Chapman and the escape. He pressed Manning about the first escaped attempt back in July when Chapman was apprehended and beaten. Manning flat out denied that this happened at all. Just as agents were departing the farm, John Williams showed up in his car. He had actually already spotted the agents from a distance. He dropped by the fields to intimidate his workers about speaking to these federal officers. So when he pulls up to the house, Williams is very cordial, cooperative. He answers all their questions, tells them they can take a look around.
Oh yeah, everything's fine here. Don't mind the all the people around you with the looks of terror on their face.
The agents had already done a cursory inspection of the property, noting the nailed windows and boarded up shutters on the bunkhouse. So they were like, yeah, that's not right. When one of the agents asked about Gus Chapman, Williams answered honestly. He admitted that Chapman had escaped in November and had previously tried to escape in July. He agreed with those reports that, he'd run away, and Williams, unlike Manning, was truthful, stating that, yes, he had in fact tracked the man down with the dogs and forced him back to the farm, explaining that Chapman still owed him money on this prison debt. When this happened, Agent Brown looked over at Clyde Manning and declared, quote, "You lying scoundrel, you."
Wow.
Manning had denied that Chapman was chased down because he thought it would land Mr. Johnny in trouble. So he was trying to cover for his boss, right? But in the end, it just backfires. Williams then informed Agents Brown and Wismer that John Strickland and Chapman, who were both escapees, had actually worked on Hewlin's farm up the road. So, they didn't even work here on my farm. They worked on my son's farm. And they, kind of sent them up that way or whatever. So Williams had heard reports that federal agents might soon be charging local farmers in Jasper County with peonage. He concluded that the visit meant he had a target on his back. Therefore, Williams made a decision. The following day, Williams greeted Manning after breakfast. He explained to his loyal worker that they needed to get rid of the stockade laborers, stating, quote, "It won't do for them to testify against us."
Oh my God.
Clyde paused and asked, "Mr. Johnny, you telling me you want me to do away with them boys?" And Williams answered, "Yes, we have to do away with them all." Manning told Williams, "I don't want to do it. I hate to do it." Hearing this, Williams told Manning, "It's your neck, and if you think more of their necks than you do your own, then it's your neck." So
So,
basically, like, if you don't do what I say, I'll fuck you up.
yeah, or they're going to get you in trouble as well. And, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, more like I think he was saying, "I'll kill you if you don't do this." So Williams instructed his sons Marvin, Hewlin, and Leroy to leave the state for some unannounced destination. He had a serious talk with his sons about their roles in the murders and other illegal activities on the farm. Williams thought if he sent his sons away, they would evade any type of interrogation or formal charges. So these dudes just, like, leave.
So he's basically clearing his sons out, and then they won't be present for what else he's about to do. Can't be blamed for that. And
They
basically
won't have to answer for the other murders that they've committed. Because
Right.
remember, Leroy, Marvin, I mean, they've shot and killed men on the farm.
Right, and if the shit's going to go down, he's just trying to clear his sons out because they're obviously guilty as well.
Exactly. So 2 days after this conversation, Manning assumed that Mr. Johnny was speaking out of fear or anger, and he was starting to relax a little because, it's been 2 days. Like, he hasn't brought it up again.
So Manning, even though he's, kind of been benefiting when others suffer in this situation to a degree, he still he doesn't want to outright kill the laborers.
No, not
Right.
at all.
He doesn't want to do that at all.
He doesn't want to do it.
Which is, I don't blame him. So he's not above maybe living a little better than them and not getting in trouble like they do, but outright murder of all of them, that's just too much for him.
Right, and I mean, he's a victim in all of this too. He's got a mother, siblings, a wife, children there. I mean, he's pretty much been beaten into submission, like his whole life.
Right.
And he's afraid. I mean, he knows what this family is capable of and that they will kill his family if he doesn't do what they say, or they'll kill him. I mean, his neck's on the chopping block too. So it's kind of like a do or die situation. And, it's like we can all kind of look at Clyde Manning and be like, well, that's fucked up, his participation and just being so obedient and taking orders. But if you were in that situation, I mean, how would you handle it? I really had to think about that when I was covering this case.
Well, he's been there since he was a kid, right?
Yeah.
All he knows is that farm.
He doesn't know anything else.
And this relationship with this twisted family and Mr. Williams. So, I mean, it's like, he's been brainwashed, I mean, he's been traumatized over and over the years. And yeah, I mean, it's you can take a step back and, yeah, he does share some blame to a degree.
I mean, yeah, he's a perpetrator.
But, I mean, if you look at how
he's also simultaneously a victim.
Yeah, a long-term victim over years.
So he's kind of starting to relax a little bit, thinking like this is past, when his boss collected him from his duties and told him to go fetch an axe. A laborer named Johnny Williams was at the bottom of a pasture repairing a fence when both Manning and Williams show up. Johnny Williams thought Clyde Manning had just come to help him, so he's concentrating on his work when Williams demands that Manning hit him.
With an axe?
With an axe, Dylan.
My God.
Clyde Manning pulled back the axe, delivering a thunderous blow to the left side of Johnny Williams' head. The man lay dead in the field, blood everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't sound like a good cover-up so far.
Williams tells Manning to drag the body over to a gully in the pasture and orders him to dig a grave in the red clay dirt. So then Manning has to bury this guy. So when it was supper time, Manning goes back to the bunkhouse. The other farm workers ask, "Where's Johnny?" And that's when Clyde Manning tells them maybe he run off.
Yeah, right.
And thus begins a series of brutal murders against 11 black men who are forced laborers on Williams' farm. In episode 2, Mountain Murders will dive into the other 10 murders, as well as the investigation and trial. This is a very detailed story, as I mentioned, and I don't want to miss out on delivering the most informative case, so we have to make it a two-part episode, as I've already told you guys.
Yeah, and I don't think we can handle but so much of this at a time.
It's a lot, Dylan.
It's brutal.
Very brutal. But I think it's an important story to tell. And like I said, it's probably one of the most horrific murder cases in the state of Georgia, and yet very few people know about it.
Yeah, I'd never heard tell of any of this, and wow, as infuriating as the first part was, it's an interesting story just from the standpoint of we're students of human depravity here at Mountain Murders, just like our listeners. Gosh, I can only hope that Mr. Williams gets his just desserts in the end.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Well, I wanted to give you guys my resources, my references. I'll send those on my resume as well. No, my resources today is a book called Lay This Body Down. It was written by a fellow named Gregory Freeman, and also various newspaper articles. I dug up some articles from the 1920s when the trial was actually happening, Dylan, and the way these newspaper articles are written is also very infuriating. The language, terminology, and just the depiction of this whole thing, it made me really mad.
My God. And since it is late and I did forget to open the show with our new patrons, I would like to thank Teresa for sponsoring today's episode on patreon.com. Thank you, Teresa.
Patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast, Dylan.
That's where you get it at.
If you would like to send us an email, you can do that at mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. And of course, you can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of that stuff.
You can follow me in town.
Oh, yeah?
Yup.
They'll find you. You're just sitting and looking.
You can't miss me.
Oh, yeah? Well, I don't have all of the details, Dylan, but I thought it was kind of interesting. I read a little something today that Brian Laundrie's journal that they found in the wet bag out in this wilderness reserve in
Also,
Florida.
it was preserved in a wet bag?
Yeah.
I was wondering about
that.
that.
It was turned over to Gabby Petito's family, and that their attorney has it and is supposedly going to release details about that.
That's interesting that it was turned over like that to her family and their attorney.
And like I said, I don't know all the details about this. I'm sure the attorney is going to give us a full statement, but they were indicating that he definitely committed suicide, according to the journal.
And so it's basically his last words are there in the journal, talking about I'm an asshole, I'm a coward.
Well, maybe it will offer up some excuse or explanation of what happened.
I got a bad feeling it's going to be half victim blaming and half woe is me.
Oh, you think so?
Yup.
I mean, it could be. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I don't know. That whole case is just so wild, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories floating around that there was like some sort of cover up and he really didn't kill himself. And I mean, of course, you're always going to get those conspiracy theories.
Whoa,
but
what's getting covered up?
that it wasn't actually him in the reserve or whatever.
Oh, so he's still out there?
Yeah, that like somehow his parents paid off this medical examiner and all. I don't know. I saw some video where they were saying that like one of the medical examiners had already been like fired from the job, and I don't know if any of that's true, but it'll be interesting to see, like I said, what comes of it.
So, that's one of those deals where the conspiracy is pretty big, the group of people involved, to the point where logistically it wouldn't work. Like, even if this person and if these 5 people are willing to be in on it, this other 100 people are like, what the fuck? Yeah, I mean, come on. That's there are some strange things going on around us in this world today, for sure. But, and we've obviously outlined some conspiracy theories of our own as far as pedo rings, elite hunting clubs, blah, blah, blah. But
Travis Scott's Astro World.
we can do a third. We're going to do a Patreon on that. Okay.
Will we?
Yes, I think we should.
Okay.
But chaos energy, blah blah blah.
Chaos magic.
Yes. But it's like everything's not a damn conspiracy, people.
Are you sure? I feel like it's a conspiracy that you're saying that. Like you're conspiring to keep the truth from all of us, Dylan. You're in on it.
Jesus. And that's how some people act just
you're
like that.
You're in on it.
This episode of Mountain Murders
Who's paying you?
Is a conspiracy. I'm a sellout. I'm a shill for the machine.
Well, if you are getting like a big check from George Soros or whatever, I found some boots and a sweater I want to order. So hand over some money, Daddy.
Fucking Soros. He pays
Here's
everybody.
Another true crime story, true crime news that just came out. It's in our home state of North Carolina. I thought I'd mention this, and then we can wrap things up, Dylan. A North Carolina man who served 24 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit has officially been pardoned.
Is he black?
How'd you know?
What the fuck? Let me guess. His witness hinged on eyewitness statements.
Well, let me get into
or
that.
His trial.
So, our governor, Roy Cooper, pardoned Montoya Dante Sharp. He was given a life sentence for the first-degree murder of another man whom he was accused of killing during a reported drug deal years ago. So, Governor Cooper has reviewed the case and is giving him a pardon of innocence. He's been wrongly convicted, and Governor Cooper says, we need to acknowledge this is an injustice, and it needs to be fully, publicly acknowledged.
Yeah.
So this pardon will now allow Sharp to seek compensation for his wrongful conviction. He can seek up to $750,000.
That's not enough.
It's not,
24
years of your life.
Yeah, I don't know how old he is now, but I'm going to assume he was rather young when he was in prison.
Yep, so back in 1995, he was 19 years old.
Boom.
He was convicted and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison for the murder of a guy named George Radcliffe, who was found shot in his pickup truck in 1994, so a year prior. During his trial, a 15-year-old girl named Charlene Johnson testified that she saw Sharp shoot Radcliffe in a fight over drugs.
It's every time, dude.
A few weeks later, she would recant her testimony. Sharp's hopes to overturn this conviction was finally heard in 2019. There were 2 hearings, evidentiary hearings or whatever. The presiding judge determined that this Johnson person was not present at the time of the shooting and that her testimony was entirely made up based on what she saw on television and what investigators were feeding to her. Coerced investigation.
A few weeks after the trial, she recanted her testimony?
Yes.
Well, see, I'm telling you, man, that's what's the scariest thing about our system is, A, all they got to do is convince the jury, right? No matter how they get there. If the jury believes it, it don't matter if it's true or not. And once you get convicted, it is really, and I think that could be addressed on the federal level, right? If it's turnover by an appellate court, or this in this case the recanting of very important testimony, damning testimony, there should be just a mechanism well, look, we were wrong. Sorry, we were wrong. Let them out. It's an act of fucking Congress to get out of jail or to get a conviction overturned. It's insane.
Well, Sharp was released from prison back in August of 2019 after those 2 evidentiary reviews. The Pitt County District Attorney Office has said that they dismissed the charges and they would never retry his case because they didn't have enough evidence and they didn't expect any to come up.
So he was officially pardoned anyways?
But today he was officially pardoned or, this week. So then that means he can file,
right,
to get some money, some financial compensation.
Right.
Well, we have these organizations like the Innocence Project and other groups that try to free these innocent folks in jail. And you're right about eyewitness accounts, Dylan. It seems like more than not, they're just very unreliable.
Well,
so to me, a witness account should be considered circumstantial evidence.
It should be part of the case.
It should be part, but it shouldn't hinge on someone getting a life sentence or getting a death sentence. There should be more physical evidence to prove or to link this person.
I'll tell you what eyewitness testimony is like. It's like your 401k. It should be a small supplement or small part of your retirement, but not the entire not the entire thing. You should have a pension, guaranteed benefits to go along with that 401k.
You think so?
Because it can crash right before you retire, and then you got shit.
Well, I love how you break it down into Dylan terms.
Gotta get you some sheep coin, y'all.
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
Don't get him started on
Hey,
cryptocurrencies.
we're going to be rich. We hit a penny, honey, and it's over.
Okay, you guys invest.
Get a little some.
We need to hit that penny.
Hey, even if we hit half a penny, we're going to be all right.
Yeah, then we'll have more time to podcast, Dylan.
It's true.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. I know we were trying to wrap it up, and then I wanted to talk a little true crime news, but we are going to wrap it up. We'll be back on Wednesday with a new Offbeat.
I'm unwrapping it.
He's unwrapping. Please just wait, because that's inappropriate right now. You can unwrap it in the privacy of your room.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, we should mention, if you haven't followed us on Instagram, you should totally do that, because we got a puppy this week.
Oh, my God.
We got a little puppy. He's so cute. We have a little Mountain Murders mascot. His name is Rufus.
It's possibly one of the cutest puppies I've ever seen.
He's a Shih-Tzu, which is like a Shih Tzu and a Chihuahua mix. They call him Shih-Tzus.
I'm just going
or a Chi-Chi.
I'm going to call him Rufus.
Well, his name is Rufus. And you didn't like that name at first, but I think it totally fits him.
Yeah, it's growing on me.
Well, I don't care what you think. It's my
When he
dog.
starts smoking cigars and telling me about the good old days, then I'll be like, okay, he's Rufus.
Well, he had a 40-year aged malt whiskey.
A single malt
Yeah,
scotch.
Whatever. When
What?
I don't know. I was
Stop.
trying to think, what does Stifler's mom drink?
Is he sitting in a wingback leather chair in a study?
He's actually wearing a tweed.
What the fuck?
He's wearing a little tweed blazer right now with suede
And a monocle?
elbow. Yeah.
And he's in his library?
Yeah. It
Jesus.
smells of rich mahogany.
He's a professor of literature.
Philosophy.
Ah,
Okay.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so he's super cute. If you follow us on Instagram, if you don't, you want to, because you got to see this cute puppy. He's adorable. If you are on Patreon, we've posted multiple pictures of him in our Discord chat. So you got to check him out. He's super cute.
Get on the gram.
Get on the gram, guys. Okay, we'll see you on Wednesday. Until then, I'm going to make sure that Dylan is on his best behavior.
Bye.